The Israeli Defense Forces are set up 3 reception centers, one in the north, one outside central Gaza, and one too in the south of the country, where the hostages will be checked over. No one knows what condition they will be in after 471 days held by Hamás, suffering the bombardment by Israel on Gaza, moved no doubt multiple times, living in tunnels underground. We just spoke to one hostage who said that his sister was held on her own for 54 days. There will be a sense of isolation for many of them. Once they've been checked over physically, the mental trauma also assessed, which is a great concern, trauma from the day itself, what they saw that day, how they were taken into Gaza, and then how they were kept by Hamas gunmen, not knowing if they would live or die. They will then be taken by helicopter to a hospital in Israel. The recommendation from the authorities there is that they spend at least 4 days adjusting in hospital. They'll meet their family members, they'll be reunited. We spoke to Gilly just a short time ago, who had tears in his eyes as he remembered hugging his family member for the first time. The emotion of that moment for them. Pictures then from inside Gaza. It is a waiting process. We were told it may take some 2 hours for this handover to be completed. Previously in Gaza, near Kerem Shalom, some 200 trucks have been standing by. I spoke a while ago to a UNICEF representative. They have trucks in that queue trying to come in. 20 of them are fuel as well, giving power to people in Gaza, allowing them to heat food, which is much needed. Crowd gathering on the streets in Gaza this morning at 6:30 UK time, before the ceasefire was delayed. Well, earlier I spoke to Lord Pollack, who's very close to the
nightmare. The only problem with nightmares is you wake up after them. This has been an ongoing nightmare for so long, and Mandy has been so brave, so brave. She wasn't cut out to go and see presidents and prime ministers and all the people that she has done, and she's done it brilliantly. Getting Emily's name out there, because without that work, I don't think today would have come. Keeping Emily's name there. You know, there's a really nice piece, because on Emily's left arm is written "Mum was all period." That Mandy must have known that Emily would look at her arm and Mum is always right, was with her throughout this, and we're of course all looking forward to hopefully seeing her later today.
How would you say the last 470, I think that's 1 day out actually, it's 471 days, but how has it been for all of these families? Because the not knowing, it's just so terrible for the human condition.
We're all parents, grandparents. Yeah, you do everything and you do anything to find it. It's impossible. And today, it is true. I mean, there are 3 families happy. Maybe not happy when they see the state of their loved ones, but there's 95 other families who are still hanging on and going through this nightmare, as we say.
Well, Mum Mandy is here waiting to hug her daughter. Hamás has told the Reuters news agency the hostage handover is underway. There have been cheers in the crowds here in Hostages Square. So let me bring in Ambassador Sheikh, who's been diplomacy hostage family for that has worked so hard.
Women who have been virtually part of our lives, of this whole nation's lives, for 15 months, and suddenly we won't see them physically, obviously, for quite a while, but we'll know that their families have got them back, and that is really the only piece of good news that we've had for a very, very long time. Why bittersweet? Because down the road there are still many tears to be shed.
We're watching Israeli television here, aren't we? I think there are a little off. What's everybody watching here?
I think these are the first informal and unofficial images of the Red Cross cars taking possession, if you please, of the 3 hostages. And you know, it's difficult to decipher who this is, but apparently it's Romi Gonen that people saw.
So Romi Gonen is in a car right now. The picture's being shown on Israeli television. Cheers and applaud from the crowd. This is, as you say, bittersweet. There is celebration today, but we're surrounded by faces of others who are still held.
Yes.
For you personally, head of diplomacy for the Hostages Forum family, how much have you fought to get this release? How hard have you had to work to see this day?
Not hard enough, because they're still not here. But in order to get to number 98, which is the number of hostages, you have to start with number 1. And this is why this moment is so important. And that these 3 young women who will come back to their families will be really just the beginning, the first crack in this terrible wall. It's been an emotional roller coaster, especially for the families. You know, we the volunteers who work there, it's nothing compared to what the families go through. They saw Emily Damari.
Emily Damari.
Apparently.
What is happening? Are they in a Hamas vehicle still? So they're still in a Hamas vehicle, leaving where they were being held.
Supposed to be handed over now to the Red Cross, who will then bring them to a meeting point with the Israeli authorities.
So we see surrounded by armed men taken into a vehicle. So this is stage 1 of the process to get them away from the places that they've been held.
Yes, and I hope that this is just a model, because there are many such stations on the way in the next 42 days until we reach the full number of 30. This part of the agreement, ability of the international community to be watchful that this agreement, that this deal will go through until the very end, until the very last hostage back.
More applause. Perhaps we saw Doron Steinbrecher as well, moving into the car. Some hostages were freed in November 2023. We know how traumatic the process was for many of them. Some suggested they thought they were going to be taken to be executed. They don't necessarily get told what is happening.
Necessarily. I hope this is not the case here. But, you know, in any event, this is a different situation. I mean, the 110 people freed last November, November 2023, they were freed after 50 or 52 or 53 or 55 days of captivity. Now we're talking about people who went through nearly 10 times as much. So we don't know what the physical or psychological situation of these young women will be.
An Israeli official has now said that the 3 Israeli hostages have been handed over to the Red Cross. Your reaction?
Amazing news. Amazing. Many tears now. There were so many bad tears, and there still are. You know, the people who are waiting and will unfortunately get bad news out of these exchanges, because we don't know that everybody's in good health and everybody is alive, except the 36 people that we know that are confirmed dead. There might be bad surprises, but also good surprises. But let's start with today. Today is really a day of joy.
But you're right, this is the first confirmation we've had that those 3 hostages are alive.
Right. I hope they're in reasonable shape. They can't be in good shape after such a long time in horrendous conditions. But I hope they can start a very, very long.
Crowds gathering, obviously, in Gaza. We see the masked Hamás fighters as well. Their guns aloft. A thumbs up from one of them I've just seen as well, actually, because this is part of a ceasefire that the people of Gaza have wanted, have they not? And we know that people have been taken from Gaza into Israeli prisons. Possibly they believe they'll see the return of their two-way process.
I'm listening to you. I'm sorry, I can't listen to both.
No, exactly.
But there's something good happened.
Something good happened, yes. And another big cheer from the crowds here. I've been here a number of times. This is the first time. There's a sense of joy.
Yes. So precisely seen. It's, everybody deserves a moment of an uplifting moment. And it comes in terrible circumstances, and I have a thought for the people in Gaza too. The thing is that, this agreement in the end is tragically simple. You can't end the war without freeing all the hostages, and you can't free all the hostages without ending the war. We'll also bring the last moment of concern and worry for the citizens of Gaza and the beginning of rebuilding.
Well, we're both watching pictures from Gaza, surrounded by people cheering in Tel Aviv and hostages, and the civil capital, about the trauma and the tragedy of October the 7th.
I both hope that the answer is yes, and I hope the answer is no. Because there's still a very long way to go, and a lot of things can go freed, but you can't just look away now and go to other business. This is still the focus of Israeli society, of the Israeli government, and should be the focus of the international community. It's over until it be over, when 98 hostages, alive or dead, will come home.
Here in Hostages Square, people have their telephones aloft taking pictures. They're in Gaza, people take pictures to freedom of 3 Israeli here, stages to go certainly, but at least phase 1 is underway. People like you have worked so much to achieve, have you not? Personally, do you feel that you have had a part to play in this, or of so many people?
Tiny part, but I feel grateful to the families that they gave me and some of my colleagues an opportunity to do something useful. That's all. And I must say a word about the diplomat community here in Israel. Many ambassadors have gathered here, and many of them have been very close to the forum and very close to there are 20 citizenships among the hostages, nearly 20, including British citizens, British nationals, but there are French and Argentinians and Serbians, and today there is a British citizen who is being freed, Emily Damari.
Well, the Red Cross has now communicated that the Israeli hostages to the Red Cross. They are now on their way towards the Israeli Defense Forces in the Gaza Strip. We're watching pictures now of the southern border area. This is where we are. I know that the IDF set up 3 reception centers, one in the north, one around Rein in central Gaza or opposite central Gaza, and one in the south, not far from that they come out. So what would you anticipate to see here?
Well, I'm not sure we're going to see all of this, but they're going to be handed over from the Red Cross to the Israeli authorities, checked up by medical staff, and then transferred to hospitals that have been preparing for many months for this moment. And you know, according to their both physical and psychological well-being, they will be handled and treated as seen best, be very read with their families.
Amid the stated aims of the war for the Israeli Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was the release of the hostages and the destruction of Hamas. As part of the handover, we see Hamas fighters in their vehicles, their guns aloft. It does not feel in these pictures that Hamas has been destroyed.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I couldn't care less. I'm here really, we're a civil society organization. Our only concern is the families of the hostages and their release. And, you know, if the other side celebrates, fine. I don't think it's a good thing that Hamas will come out of it victorious in Gaza. I don't think it's good for the Gazans. But, you know, this is my remit, and I'm happy for whoever feels liberated today.
I asked because it felt at times the two were not compatible. Indeed. There's the border picture once again. It looks like vehicles are approaching. Who knows if they are indeed those ambulances of the International Red Cross who will make their way across the border. Israeli television has turned up the volume here.
It's a song that became sort of an anthem of it's called Home, the song, and it's become sort of an anthem of the hostage square.
So an anthem of hostage square is playing. They're showing on the television here the faces of 3 women in a Hamas vehicle before they're handed over to the Red Cross. Let's take you then to Offa Prison, the other part of this exchange. Alex Rossi is standing by for us there. Alex.
Hey, Anna. Well, we are starting to get some signs of activity here at Offa Prison, which is behind me. You can just see it in the distance. You can see the red and blue lights of police vehicles. We've seen military vehicles coming down this road here from the prison. We are expecting the prisoners to be taken down on coaches down this road and dropped off somewhere towards Ramallah. Not sure exactly where. But there were a couple of coaches over there. We'll just move the camera in a bit further. Offa Prison, of course, is where the prisoners from other prisons are being brought, phase 1. And then this is being used as the distribution point from where they will leave. But we'll just move away from the prison now, and I'll show you the scene here. We're up on a hillside in the occupied West Bank, overlooking the prison. Plenty of press here, much of it Palestinian, international press as well. But lots of people have come out as well to witness what's about to happen, but also celebrate as well. You can see the hillside here. People have been lighting fires to stay warm. And we've also heard in the last 10 minutes the sounds of fireworks, people letting off fireworks to celebrate 20 people in this first phase. So that's 30 prisoners for each of the female hostages. 78 of them are women and children. They are from the West Bank, that's where 12 of them are men and women from East Jerusalem. Interestingly, when you go through the list of people who've been taken by the Israelis, been arrested and obviously gone through military courts, most of them have been arrested since October the 7th. We know, of course, that Israel has intensified its operations, its raids here in the West Bank and also in East Jerusalem since October the 7th. But the mood here is one, but people have come out to not only witness it, but also to celebrate the release of these prisoners.
Alex Rossi updating us there from Offa prison. Alex, thank you very much indeed. They have shown the faces of 3 young women. It is the first that they are here. Alistair Bunkle, our Middle East correspondent, joins me now. It's been an extraordinary atmosphere, certainly, but we now know hostages held for 471 days are now making their way back to their families.
Yeah, and the movement by road from where they were handed over in Gaza from Hamás to the International Red Cross should be quite quick, depending on which route they take. No more than half an hour. I mean, we saw at the moment of transfer and at the location of transfer, it was a very intense environment with hundreds of Gazans, many young Palestinian men crowding around the various vehicles. But I think once they've got through that, actually it should be very quick. We think they're going to the Reim meeting point, which is kind of the midpoint of Gaza. We've seen them, or they have been seen walking. It is a sign that a lot of people dared to hope for, because we had no idea. I understand that one of them might have had a bit of medical attention there before being made the transfer, but they will now go to the Israeli military, who are waiting for them. We've seen helicopters waiting, and their mothers have all been taken down to the border to meet them when they come out.
It's an indication we had a little earlier, actually, that Mandy Damari was one of those. These are mothers who will.
The feelings when they finally see their daughters. They have been campaigning for almost 18 months for their release, to keep their story in the public's eye here in Israel. Just tears at the psyche of Israel, and will continue to do so until every last hostage is out. But harder to keep them in the public eye around the world, as you know, life has moved on around the world, but they have traveled around the globe, making sure that the stories of these hostages are still being told, whether it's in forums like the United Nations or parliaments around. And so Mary Damari, you know, when she sees her daughter Emily, as the case for the other mothers, I'm sure it will be an intensely private and emotional moment. I very much doubt we will get to see it for very good reasons, but you know, what must be going through their head now.
And in terms of Gaza, huge crowds came out for this moment as well. This is the start of a much needed ceasefire for the people of Gaza. They woke to more bombing this morning, with the failure of this ceasefire to be enacted on time, a near 3-hour delay. More bombing, we saw more deaths too. And what will it mean for the people of Gaza now, do you think, to wake up or sleep overnight without the sound of Israeli jets in the sky above them?
You know, in a way that I'm sure we'll barely be able to comprehend, that they can now go to sleep in a degree of safety. But of course, you know, Gaza is almost totally destroyed in many parts. You know, they will still be living in canvas tent their way back home to parts of Gaza where they can. The transfer back to the north will be a slowish process, and they will find that their houses, their apartments, for the most part, have been completely destroyed, and life there will never be. Where people have been dying in their dozens most days, children, tens of, thousands of children have lost their lives. Anesthetic to have cesareans, children dying as a result of the cold in this past winter, starvation, malnutrition. It is a place that has undergone and gone through the most horrendous 15 and a half months, but they will be hoping to finally aid can get in the volumes that is needed.
Well, the image on the television screen behind me in Hostages Square, as people applaud once again, is the faces of 3 young women in a Hamas vehicle about to be handed to the International Red Cross. The faces of Romy, Emily and Doron, now freed, making their way towards the border to be handed over to the Israeli military to eventually be brought into Israel, to hospital. And as we heard there from Alistair, their mothers home down to greet them. Quite a moment that will be. But let's return and focus then on Gaza, a ceasefire so needed there. We know that some 200 trucks have been waiting at the Kerem Shalom border, waiting to bring aid in. So let's talk now to Ahmed Abu Razik, founder of the Gaza Great Minds Foundation. Welcome to you. What does today mean, do you think, for the people of Gaza?
Hello, Anna. Thank you for having me. Actually, today is a new chapter in the Palestinian history. Today was a tremendous day to us in Gaza Strip. We felt like we are real again. We are newborn again. I can tell you about the mixed feeling that we are feeling right now. A feeling of grieving after today on the streets, the skeleton from where Israeli were on the war zones in the northern side of Gaza and even in different sites in Gaza. The scenes were horrific. We didn't even imagine this in our worst nightmares. All had wiped down, and we feel like we are walking in a zombie land. Skeletons everywhere, dead bodies, blood is everywhere. So people in Gaza now, they can breathe, they can sleep without bombs at night. Terrifying. Their children, they can at least eat a meal a day, not suffer a day with the lack of food and nutrition. Yeah, it's a new chapter in our life.
A zombie, give us what it was like day to day for you living in Gaza City.
Today we woke up in the morning in a hope of finding one of our houses standing. So we row house were standing. So we still alive, and we will see more dead or news about that, but we went to our houses knowing that they are destroyed because we want to grab even a memory or even a doll for our children have left before. So it was, for me, it was a grieving day. Yes, mixed with some celebration on the ground, because now we at least we will not hear sad news or massacres there, right? But it's not easy to house rubbles, just rocks. It's not easy at all.
So very difficult. And we last week who suggested that every family in Gaza has lost someone. Dare I ask if your family has lost people in this war?
I lost my father. On the 4th November. A lot of my friends and my students also.
How are you living with that devastation to your family?
Come again, please. I didn't hear that coming.
how are you dealing with that trauma of losing your father and losing part of that community around you?
I'm gonna lie.
Around you.
I'm gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie in you and telling you that we are coping or we pass this stage of our life, but we still suffering from trauma, and we can't pass this because simply we still violent. Like, don't imagine that with the ceasefire, Gaza to return to heaven. So everywhere you go, you see blood and dead bodies and destruction everywhere. It's not easy at all. We need years in order to heal just from the trauma and from the psychological issues that we already had. It's not easy at all, and the pressure on us because I'm now responsible of my family. All of them after my father passed away, so it's not easy at all, and we hope there's whole rebuilding for Gaza, more aid's coming so we can rebuild again and relife again and see beautiful days and beautiful memories in front of us.
I know that the United Nations, on the anniversary of October the 7th, estimated that there were 42 million tons of rubble in Gaza now. It would take 14, perhaps 15 years of reconstruction to rebuild, to start again, to start afresh, given so many homes. I think more than 90% of homes have been destroyed there. It feels exhausting to even hear about the process that needs to be got through to rebuild Gaza. How are you hoping to live now, day by day? Start to go home where they live? Will people be back on the...
Talking about myself, not just talking about people, I will live in a tent. I already living in a renting apartment, but the owner of the home, his house was totally destroyed, so he will be in this apartment, the renting apartment where I am. But the thing is that me and many Gazans will live in tents. We will get back to the Stone Age, if you can say so, and living in these tents, which is really, really cold at winter and really hot at summer. You can, like, we previously lived in a tent, and I can't just imagine or describe in words how does it look like to live in a tent with your children. I have a child. He's just 2 months old. He came in war, and I can't describe it, but believe me, it's not easy at all to live in a tent or in a camp. And most Gazans are now actually living in classes at schools, taking it as a shelter, because there's no shelters in Gaza. There's no caravans which are ready or for human beings like us coming for a day or not, or a day or two, but we are living our life in these tents. It's 4x4 tent. You need to call future from this point, from that tent. So it's not gonna be easy days coming, but hopefully the good thing is there's no killing, there's no massacres day and night.
And Ahmed, do you have confidence in aid agencies, charities, the international community, UNRWA, even the UN Relief and Works Agency, to help deliver, proper accommodation for people possibly, or the food, sanitation, water systems that are required? Do you believe that help will come?
I hope so, Anna, but as a Palestinian living over 15 months from this genocide of war, I can tell you that the organization, they even care about just following Israelis, orders. And from what I saw, that the word let us down. Maybe some people on the ground, they refused the occupation. They tried a lot, but talking about the big organization, for the global organizations, they did not do what was expected from them. I hope this chapter change, or this period something else happen, but I'm sorry, we lost hope. We lost the trust on the global community, or let me say the global international organization, to be honest.
Mahmoud Abu-Rizik, founder of the Gaza Great Minds Foundation, you have expressed so clearly to us what life has been like for you in Gaza and continues to be. We really appreciate it. Well, here in Hostages Square, a big cheer has just gone out. We'll try and find out exactly what has happened. It could be that the 3 young hostages have reached the border. We'll find out, certainly. We know that they have been handed over by Hamas in a vehicle and taken by the International Red Cross towards the border. The cheer was so big. We find out, excuse me, what has just happened?
They are in Israeli hands.
They're in Israeli hands. So confirmation here from Hostages Square, Israeli television, a huge cheer went out. It is understood that the 3 hostages, Romy, Emily, Doron, are now in Israeli hands, and they will start to go underway in the reception centers that they've set up. They will also meet their mothers. We know that they have traveled down there to be with their daughters. The crowds here have stood watching the faces of those 3 women on the screen. I wonder if we show it quickly. And waited to hear the news and watch the handover, certainly. From Hamas, the chaotic scenes we saw there. Everyone will sing now, I think, probably in Hostages Square to pay tribute. More pictures of that moment to come, but in the meantime, a short while ago, I spoke to Daniel Lifshitz. He's waiting for his grandfather, Oded, to be freed. Let's see what he had to say.
I'm so happy that it's starting. We have Ron Shaul body in Gaza, rescued, closure for more than a decade to the family. Romy, Doron, Emily going back to their beloved ones. They are my family as well. Each one of them coming back, it's one less stone from my heart and one less stone from my grandmother's heart, because I'm not feeling inside Gaza. I'm feeling in October 7 and I'm feeling that all this part, but my grandmother, she feeling the tunnel in Gaza until they all back. So 4 went down today, 3 hostages back. A continuation is very, very important, and I'm looking forward for all the 33 to come back home.
And then subsequently the others, of course, too, because, you know, the list goes way beyond that. Yeah. Tell us about your grandparents, because both were taken, weren't they, from kibbutz near Oz, and yet your grandmother was freed, if I remember, on day 17.
Yeah.
She was not so well, is that right? 2 of them were freed that day.
Yeah, so firstly, that my grandparents were kidnapped. On October 7, I saw some footage and some videos of old people getting kidnapped, but I couldn't believe it. I couldn't process it in my mind. And at 6 p.m. when they told me my grandparents being probably kidnapped because the house is burned, but there are no traces of body, I was in shock. And then when my grandmother came back, that was unbelievable, because she lost almost 10 kilograms in 7 days, and she was in a very bad health situation, and she was released because eventually they were afraid that she will spread diseases in the tunnels. And Noor, it was really with Cooper, her arm, and it was all black, and she was in a terrible situation. My grandfather, we don't know what's going to be with him, because
How old is he?
He's 84 years old. He's the only great-grandfather held hostage in the world. We see the clock saying 470. They were all of those 33 being in that list, which so-called humanitarian list, with the right pressure from the international community, they would be released after 7 days, not after 407. We wanted to be in this situation. As much as it's tough and hard, I welcome it with blessing, with love, because this is where we want to be. And my grandfather, the last thing we know about him was from November 23, when he was at start my grandmother said he was murdered, because she saw him unconscious. Then he was just unconscious, and hostages saw him. One of them, Ada Sagi, when she was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz, she was in shock that there were so many civilians in Kibbutz Nir Oz on that day, from the age of 10, 14. And she said that she went into a store of fruits and vegetables inside Khan Yunis, and she saw my grandfather on the table. He was with a white galabia bleeding. He was conscious, and he told him that Ada, she knows Arabic, I know a bit, she knows more, speak with her. They told her that they're going to take the bullet out of his hand. And then another hostage, Hannah Katzir, rest in peace, a hero that had been kidnapped from her wheelchair in Kibbutz Nir Oz. She said that she was with him for about 20 to 30 days. They were in an apartment, they didn't get any medication. And after 20, 30 days, he felt bad, and they took him, maybe for treatment, we don't know, but Hannah stayed there, and she was handicapped. She told her captives, he saved me, he saved my life here. So they moved her to that apartment. So actually, we don't know. And
Daniel was talking to me a little bit earlier about his hopes for the release of his 84-year-old grandfather, Oded, is already released on day 17 of the conflict, or after October the 7th. We've just had a statement now from the Israeli military, from the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli Security Agency, Shin Bet effectively. The 3 released hostages, the statement says, are currently being transferred to IDF and ISA forces in the Gaza Strip. The 3 released hostages are being accompanied by IDF special forces and ISA forces on the return to Israeli territory, where they will undergo an initial medical assessment. The commanders and soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces salute and embrace the released hostages as they make their way home to the state of Israel. The IDF spokesperson's unit asks everyone to respect the privacy of the released hostages and their family. The border, a small crowd gathering there. It is very difficult for many people to access that area still. So the transfer, which we were told might take a couple of hours, young people there who are holding placards with pictures of the hostages on, placards to greet them as they cross the border into Israel. We know that 2 of the hostages were taken from Gaza, and one of them, Remy, taken from music festival. She was on the phone to her mother at the time. She tried to flee when the Hamas militants began to attack. So many ran, some hid, we know, in clumps of trees. And Remy was on the phone to her mother, describing how she was in a private car and told her mother, "I've been shot. Everyone in the car has been shot." And it was clearly at that moment that she was taken hostage. So here in Hostages Square, they've been witnessing the moment of that handover. We have seen quite clearly the faces of 3 hostages in a Hamas vehicle. Gaza to watch this moment of the handover. For the people of Gaza, this marks an important part, clearly, of the ceasefire process, which came into force earlier this morning. It was due to start at 6:30 UK time, 8:30 here. It was nearly 3 hours later when finally it was agreed, but not before bombing happened in parts of northern and central Gaza. 8 people, we understand, were killed in that, and 25 injured. We watched ambulances this morning bringing those injured to hospitals in Gaza. It felt like the bombardment would continue. And then finally, Hamas managed to work out its technical field problems that it blamed for the delay, handed the names of 3 women to the Israeli forces who could then give the go-ahead for the ceasefire to come into force, a ceasefire that was negotiated midweek in Doha in Qatar. We know that envoys for both outgoing President Joe Biden and incoming President Donald Trump were there in Qatar, along with mediators from Egypt and Qatar itself. We know that the head of Mossad, the head of Shin Bet forces were there too, and the leadership of Hamás. The ceasefire signed, but yet more than 200 people died since then in Gaza as the Israeli bombardment continued. So the handover, chaotic scenes then in Gaza as those 3 women handed over. The still taken from that, no doubt circulating now on social media. They look scared, I have to say. And as part of the ceasefire deal, the other side is the release of Palestinian prisoners, some 90 of them, we're told today, 78 of them women, I think our correspondent Alex Rossi was saying. We can see stationary vehicles, blue lights standing by there. And it will be at the point, presumably, or soon after, that the Israeli hostages are in Israeli hands, that they will begin to gather those Palestinian prisoners to be released back to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. More than 90 names were released, and then yesterday, all of those 735 had come from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. 1,067 from Gaza. They're seen as murderers and terrorists. We know that families who lost loved ones in terror attacks here in Israel have been informed that the perpetrator of that crime has or is going to be freed. List for the Palestinian prisoners, the Palestinian Prisoner Society, who looks after the needs of family members, suggests that people have been taken out of revenge for the condition of prison were after October 7th in revenge for those attacks. The head of that organization telling me yesterday that prisoners are losing 40 kilograms in body weight. They are starving, they are beaten. The conditions are so bad, there are so many to a room. And also that they've set up secret prisons. They believe that some of the Palestinians who've been taken from there are held in secret prisons. He called it a disappearing policy and a policy of revenge. We don't know the number of people who've been taken from Gaza. We've seen many of them stripped, virtually naked, on the streets of Gaza, waiting to be taken away. And I asked, do they include medical staff? We know some of them have been taken from hospitals. And yes, indeed, I was told how many. And of the 1,067 who are on the list to be freed as part of phase 1, they have not been named. So families in Gaza do not know if their loved ones are returning. They do not know if they are alive, and they do not know how they are being held in Israel. So pictures of the West Bank then, outside of the prison where those Palestinians will be freed. And as far as we know, our correspondent Alistair Bunkle joins me now here in Hostages Square. As far as we know, we heard from the crowds here, those 3 Israeli women are now in the hands of the Israelis, we understand.
Yeah, they've made it to the border. They were transferred by the International Committee for the Red Cross, and they are now in the hands of the Israeli military. We believe that the mothers were taken down there to meet their 3 daughters at that handover point. So familiar faces for them when they come back onto Israeli soil for the first time in 470 days since they were kidnapped on that morning of October the 7th. 2023. They will undergo medical checks there. There are reception centres that have been set up in the last couple of days by the Israeli military at 3 points along the Israel-Gaza border. They've been taken, we understand, to Raim, which is actually close to the Nova Music Festival, around the midpoint of the Gaza-Israel border. When there, they will have the basics like fresh clothes to put on, toiletries, food, but of course, crucially, medical care. The immediate kind of sustenance they might need or want from coming out as they start to realize that their ordeal is by helicopter to a hospital not far from where we are now. It's called Ramat Gan, which is just north of central Tel Aviv. The helicopter accompanied the military to the hospitals. Have been there before. It's a big, sprawling medical complex, about half an hour's drive from here, and they will be looked after there in specially designed rooms and wards away from the public, with the appropriate medical and psychological attention that they need to help their slow introduction back into normal life.
Stand by, Alistair. Let's listen.
Seeing hostages being released. 3 Israeli women held against their will in the dark tunnels for 470 days. 4 more women will be released in 7 days. It is every 7 days thereafter, including at least 2 American citizens in this first phase. We pray for them and their families, for they're going to be a long recovery ahead. By the 16th day of the deal, talks will begin in the second phase. This phase includes the release of Israeli soldiers and a permanent end of the war without Hamas in power or able to threaten Israel. Hundreds of trucks are entering Gaza as I speak. They're carrying assistance for civilians who suffered enormously from the war that Hamas started on October 7, 2023, nearly 15 months ago. Today alone, we anticipate several hundred trucks will enter the Gaza Strip as I'm speaking. And after so much pain, destruction, loss of life, today the guns in Gaza have gone silent. This was the deal that I outlined for the world back in May 31st. Many of you covered it at the time. It was endorsed overwhelmingly by folks around the world, including the UN Security Council, unanimously endorsed the deal, and developed in coordination with Egypt, Qatar, and Israel. I've worked in foreign policy for decades, and this is one of the toughest negotiations because of the pressure Israel built on Hamas, backed by the United States. My policy of firm support for Israel is relentlessly pursuing diplomacy, risk drawing America into a wider war in the region. I listened to those voices, many of whom I respected a great deal, but I concluded abandoning the course I'm on would not have led us to the ceasefire we're seeing today, but instead it would have risked the wider war in the region that so many feared. Now the region has been fundamentally transformed. Hamas's longtime more dead. Hamas sponsors in the Middle East have been badly weakened by Israel, backed by the United States. Hezbollah, Hamas's biggest backers. As we worked for diplomatic solutions in Lebanon, we provided ongoing assistance to support Israel's military campaign against Hezbollah, including the terror infrastructure along the border between Israel and Lebanon. Israel's campaign was extremely successful, so much so that by the end of November, the United States had brokered a ceasefire in Lebanon. Hezbollah did what it said it would never do. It cut its deal and banned Hamas. Today, in Lebanon, there's finally a new president and prime minister, both of whom support a sovereign Lebanon without Hezbollah running the show or playing any part in it. The Assad regime next door in Syria is gone, removing Iran's ready access to Lebanon. Iran is in the weakest position in decades after the U.S. military helped defend Israel from Iran missiles and Israel's military response inside Iran. Just look across the region. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. For the Palestinian people, a credible path to a state of their own. for the region and the future normalization and integration of Israel with all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, as I've spoken. You know, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began this terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks, but we haven't given up. A special thanks, particularly Brett McGurk, many of you know, spent weeks and months working nonstop to reach this deal. Many of those weeks and months out of the country. Today's ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages is a result of an effective policy that we provided for months. And we had a wider war in the Middle East than many predicted. And now it falls on the next administration to help implement this deal. I was pleased to have our team speak as one voice in the final days. Necessary and effective and unprecedented. But success is going to be consistent. Support for our friends in the region and reflect on the news from Gaza today. We also remember all the victims of this war. We're mindful. We're mindful that the pursuit of lasting peace, while never easy or quick, must always be our calling. So thank you all for listening. May God bless you all. May God protect our troops. I'm looking forward to this deal being fully implemented for me, and I'm sure.
You watched Stranger Things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've just.
Well, the outgoing.
They may be across the border of the Gaza Strip into Israel now. I'm not certain. Thank you.
Any concerns about Hamas?
Yes, apologies at the end. And actually, I can confirm that the three women, the three released hostages, have crossed into Israeli territory with IDF and ISA forces. It was the cheer we heard a short time ago here in Hostages Square. The statement reads: a short while ago, accompanied by IDF and ISA forces, the released hostages crossed the border into Israeli territory. The released hostages are currently on their way to an initial reception point in southern Israel, where they will undergo an initial medical assessment. That a joint IDF and ISA announcement. Joe Biden declaring today the guns fell silent, suggesting that on day 16 of this ceasefire deal, negotiations will begin once again. That is to free Israeli soldiers still held in Gaza. We bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, and also outlining how this region has changed so seismically as part of this campaign. Lebanon, Syria, even Iran, he said.
I remember in the hours after October the 7th happened, being briefed by the IDF, the Israeli military, and the message they kept on saying to us, you know, this is not like anything that's gone on before. Put away from your minds the previous conflicts that happened between Israel and Hamas. This time is different. You will not have seen anything like this. But we, and I use a collective we for those of us who work and live here as journalists, I don't think had any sense of what was to come. I don't honestly think that anybody in the Middle East could have foreseen the circumstances over the last year and a half. I mean, who would have imagined that Iran and Israel would directly another decade? So war. We would have imagined that Syria's lightning fashion, the dynamic has, and it is continuing to change. The ceasefire today is prisoner and hostage exchange. Yet it's nowhere to be the stage in this multi-front war. It is a moment for Israelis to celebrate the return of three hostages. It is a moment for the people of Gaza to celebrate the 93 hostages still in Gaza. There are still a Gaza Strip totally devastated that needs to rebuild, reshaped in different ways. We don't know where it's going to lead us, but this is an important moment.
Yes, and on the eve of inauguration for Donald Trump, there will no doubt be the impact of the Trump effect as well. Just hearing from the Israeli Defense Forces spokesman, Daniel Hagari, that the 3 hostages are minutes away now from being reunited with their families.
They will be met by a very small reception committee. They don't want to overwhelm them with too many faces, too many new faces. In previous occasions when hostages have come out, and unless they want to talk to you, give them space. There'll be a couple of designated people who will have direct contact with them. Of course, they're 3 mothers who have been taken down to that point, most importantly. But there'll be 1 or 2 who will be having a job with them. People receiving them will be guided somewhat by them, but they will to make sure that they have the privacy they need. Something that Daniel Hagari, speaking to the Israeli nation a couple of minutes ago, requested. Please don't put images onto social media. Please respect their privacy. But we're now seeing, we think, pictures where we're seeing pictures in the Israeli-Gaza border, and we think we are starting to see the images of the 3 hostages and the vehicles they're in coming closer to that reception point.
It is just of the ceasefire which was enacted this morning across Gaza. The 3 Israeli hostages have now been freed. They were handed over by Hamas amidst huge crowds in Gaza by masked Hamas militants. Handed to the International Red Cross, taken toward the border. We understand they are now in the hands of the Israeli military. We're told they are moments away from being flown down to Sweden. Romy Gonen, Emily Damari, a British Palestinian. Her mum Mandy has gone down to meet her. We understand the suitcase of her. Both the last 2 taken from Kfar Aza. 3 mums have sat and watched their children, the first pictures of them. They've watched the pictures of them getting into that Hamas vehicle. 3 mothers crowded together on the first of captivity.
Amazing pictures, and they're now on their way to Israel-Gaza border. I mean, this will give enormous hope to the people of Israel. There's it's going to be a long wait for the next few days before the next hospital in Gaza. It will give them hope that their loved ones will also come out alive. Daniel Hagari, who was speaking in a press conference only a few moments ago, said that hostages still alive. Speculate about that. They do believe that many of the 33 hostages due to come out in this first phase are still alive, and the 3 young women who are coming out of Gaza today will give hope to many of the relatives that more will come their way in coming weeks.
Obviously, also as part of this deal, Palestinian prisoners are being released too today. Alistair, pictures there outside the main jail where they've congregated. Off a prison on the West Bank. 69 female prisoners, we're being told, 21 male, 2 17-year-olds as well, 1 female and 1 male. The youngest is a 15-year-old boy from East Jerusalem.
Yeah. Yeah, so 30 prisoners, 30 Palestinian prisoners being released for every Israeli hostage, so 19 totally released, a mixture of ages, men, women and children, and been held there without access to lawyers and for an indeterminate amount of time. So they too are now on the way back to their homes.
Well, one Israeli TV channel reporting now that the 3 hostages will be reunited with their mothers at Reim base in a few minutes' time. Reim, as Alistair has pointed out to us, is very near the site of the Nova Music Festival, which saw such devastating losses. And that was where Romi Gonen herself was taken from, back on Israeli soil for the first time since that terrible moment. On the morning, I think it was just after 10 o'clock in the morning, the final time her mother heard her voice, on the morning of October the 7th, 2023. We can hear now from Rodal Hagari speaking for the Israeli Defense Forces.
חברו לכוח צה"ל ושב"כ, הן בידינו והן בדרך הביתה. הן בדרכם למתחם הקליטה.
They are on the way to the IDF reception. They will receive initial medical treatment there. They will be transferred to the hospital. Emily Tehila Damari was abducted from Kibbutz Kfar Aza and marked her 28th birthday in captivity. Doron Steinbacher was abducted from Kfar Aza and also had her 31st birthday in captivity. Romi Gonen from Kfar Bradim was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival compound, and she had her 24th birthday in captivity. Emily, Doron, and Romi are finally on their way home. These are truly moving moments of activity. Now we must allow their families the privacy they need in order to reunite with their loved ones. We are aware of the great expectation amongst Israelis with respect to everything that has to do with the return and condition of the hostages, and yet we must all behave with great responsibility, because these are very difficult days, and every additional difficulty piled on the families of the hostages and the hostages themselves is an irresponsible act. Please rely only on reports of officials and its platforms. Alongside the great excitement, our hearts now go out to all the other hostages sitting held in Gaza under main return. The first stage of the deal is expected to go on for 42 days. Today, the first 3 hostages have returned, and from now on, every week, between 3 to 4 additional hostages will be released. This morning, Hamas did not meet up with its promise and did not give us the list as promised, and in line with the military facilities and armed terrain calls, and ceasefire came into effect at a later hour than scheduled. than scheduled. We will not allow any breach of the agreements. As we've made clear this morning, once it came into effect, the ceasefire at 11:15 a.m., our forces were placed on the defense lines agreed in advance. In addition, we have increased the IDF forces in the Judea and Samaria region, and we are firmly prepared both on the offensive and the defensive. The IDF works together with the Mossad and the Shin Bet and the government in order to realize all the targets and goals of the war, to completely eradicate the military and governmental capabilities of Hamas, bringing back the evacuees to their homes, and the most urgent mission to bring back the hostages home. Even as we're speaking, IDF activity continues in all sectors and arenas with one clear goal: this security and safety of Israeli citizens. Questions: when will the hostages meet their mother? As we're speaking, they are on their way. They're safe and sound in our hands, and they are on the way to the reception center. They will reach there in a matter of several minutes, and there they will be met by medical teams and the military adjutancy. And the most important thing, that's where they will meet their mothers. And then after approximately 1 hour, they will be flown to the hospital where they will meet the rest of their family members. How many of the hostages with the list of 33 are still alive? There are many hostages who are alive. I'm not going to give any specific number. We have given the list over to Hamas, and we expect to receive the people that were agreed upon. Allow any breaches of the agreement. We've made that clear this morning.
So that was Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari confirming that those 3 released hostages are safe and sound. Well, joining me now is the Israeli government spokesman, David Menser. Drawing footage we've watched throughout this afternoon, handover from Hamas, the chaotic scenes in Gaza, and now about to be, or perhaps you can confirm, have they been reunited with their families?
Well, I can certainly confirm from the government's point of view that they are back in Israel, out of Hamas's hands, and we have them in our healthcare system, and they'll be getting the best possible healthcare they can after 471 days in captivity.
Are you able to tell us from initial assessments how they are? We certainly saw a close-up photograph as they got into the Hamas vehicle. They looked anxious. They
are between a mixture of tears and trepidation and elation. Because, you know, these are our daughters, these are our young women, these are innocent people that have been taken, some of them in their pajamas, from where they lived on that kibbutz down south, and now finally they've been released. This is a day that all of us here were praying for, hoping for. It's been a heavy, heavy price, both in our soldiers, but also in releasing these convicted terrorists. But all of us here, we don't know their state yet, but we are so happy they are home. We're absolutely elated. You can probably feel that in the square.
We were watching. It's a very noisy environment. Very grateful you joined us here. We heard the cheers, we heard the applause as the various stages of handover were completed. How difficult has it been to get to this point? It's been a grind negotiation, led perhaps by the Qataris, the input of the Americans, we know, the Egyptians. But how hard has it been for the Israeli government to watch this process unfold?
Look, I can't begin to tell you how emotional this whole experience has been for all of us here in Israel. We're mixed between tears and elation, and we don't know what sort of state they're going to be in, because we've heard from the mass from Hamas captivity, the terrible things which they've gone through, the dungeons, the rapes, the inhumane treatment which they've received. So all of us here are delighted that they're home. Look, from the Israeli government's humanitarian duty to save our people. Every Israeli life is, of course, supremely important to the government of Israel. Of course, every life is important, but this government had a responsibility, a humanitarian duty to bring these people home. And the fact that 3 girls home is the most wonderful feeling. All of us are close to tears constantly. So it's a really wonderful time. No doubt they'll be coming close to their families right now. All of us are absolutely over the moon.
You sound like you are. I've spoken to so many people who are nearly in tears already today, I have to say. There is a sense of emotion, partly because everybody has waited so long for this. I'm suggesting this is a deal that was very clear. Her relatives today, the 6 hostages who were shot dead by Hamas in tunnels as Israel approached. You could have saved the lives of Israeli. Was it possible to agree this deal earlier and save those people?
Well, I can answer that in one word, and that word is the terrorist organization. I was briefed by the Israeli negotiating team, and they told me very, very clearly that was Hamas who've been dragging their feet, Hamas who did not want to close a deal, and Sinwar in particular did not want a deal. With Sinwar's elimination, with the taking out of most of the leadership of Hamas, but also with Iran having been pushed back, with Hezbollah having been massively degraded, with constant hatred in Syria, Bashar, their nuclear program disrupted, their ballistic missile production having been also massively disrupted. Hamas had nowhere to go. The cavalry were not coming. The Americans have made this, we wanted this deal, and we are only too grateful now it has happened. It is, it's not a deal which we're delighted about because we're releasing terrorists with blood on their hands.
Well, a young teenager is one of them, to be fair. I don't know if that person is and most of them are women. They're perhaps not this
Indeed. Then a corresponding
some
price.
of them have been picked up, sitting in their cars, waiting at a checkpoint. Has there been, as the Palestinian Prisoners Society told me yesterday in Bethlehem when I went, has been and East October the 7th?
So frankly, that's an offensive assertion. This is a democratic government that lives by the rule of law. We have an independent judiciary. You might have heard that this is something's a big issue here in Israel. So frankly, that is an offensive comment. We have a police force, a legal system where we take law and order extremely seriously. So look, when Israel apprehends people on suspicion of terrorism or after having committed real crimes, then they go through due process. Okay, this is the only democracy in hundreds of miles in any direction. Okay, so that sort of assertion to us is absolutely not.
So are you suggesting that those people who've been taken from Gaza and held, no one seems to know, have they gone through due process as well?
Well, look, we've taken a lot of people, because they've shared with us a lot of information. We wanted to get information out of them to see when is the next terrorist attack, where our hostages are, give us the Hamas. And so that's been very important. And also, let's not forget, Israel did not accept this war. Okay, we weren't ready to take on tens of thousands of Hamas prisoners. So each of them will go through due process. It's our duty as a democratic country, and a duty we take very, very seriously.
So we're watching pictures of a jail right now where there will be that release as part of this prisoner exchange. You are confirming that those who have been taken from Gaza, we've seen confirming they will go through due process.
So if they've been stripped naked, it's because we worry that they have a suicide belt on them. Okay, we've got no interest. Gazans are not going anywhere, Israelis are not going anywhere. Ultimately, we will have to live together. But it's our duty to make sure, it's our duty to the Israeli people to make sure that terrorists are apprehended and arrested and there's due process.
Yes, we're just watching pictures now of the Israel-Gaza border. It is at the Reino crossing, I understand. So we're expecting to see perhaps some of the pictures as the women are handed over. And how important is it that they manage to meet their mothers who've flown down to see them so quickly?
Look, Israel has been waiting for this moment for many, many months now, 15 months now. I've been in touch with some of the hospitals, Beilinson and Sheba Hospital. Both of them have been doing everything they can to get the system ready to receive them and to give them every care, that's psychological care, medical care, and of course to facilitate families as well.
Let's show you then the pictures of those mothers waiting at that reception point that the IDF has set up. There they are crowding around. Let's just watch that moment. Yes, I think it's looping in fact, but what an amazing moment for them, because what you have to understand about all the families is they do not know if their loved one is alive, and this is the first proof of life in 15 months that they finally can see that their daughters are safe and sound, as Daniel highlighted.
So incredibly emotional scenes for Israelis, excuse me. They are incredibly emotional scenes because all of us here in Israel, this is an open wound in our society. Israel's government, to its credit, have done everything to bring these people home. You know, let's not lose sight for a moment that they were taken by jihadists, a jihadist terrorist organization that, to be honest, hate their own people, maybe even more than they hate Israelis, very clearly. But also, their ambition was to wipe this country off the face of the earth. 15 months on, at a very high pace, we are strong, we are more united, more peaceful future in this neighborhood.
Tears shed, no doubt, seeing those pictures across Israel. 3 mothers who've been through hell, that they both describe, or they all describe, the torturous process that they've lived through. For 4 to have been freed, they're living with the trauma of that day, of being taken, of seeing people dying around them. They're living with the trauma of being dragged into Gaza, living, we know, into the surface to be free. How will the state of Israel now care for those people? What help will be offered to them to adjust to the life they can now see, the future they can now see in front of them?
Look, this was the worst day of Jew killing since the Second World War, and we know that these people have been through the most unbearable trauma that this country has, both physically and symbolically, thrown their arms around the family. But we are so happy that they are home now and they can begin the rehabilitation process. Don't forget, now with these 3 young ladies home, there remain 94 hostages still in Hamas captivity. You know, this war could end right now before we put our kids to bed if Hamas surrendered and let our hostages go. The war would be over in an instant.
Well, I see the face just behind you of Shaul, who talked about a 30-year-old taken in 2014. His body was recovered today, brought the number from 98, I know, to 97. 1 more family who has closure today, which I know you're very proud of that moment. But in Gaza, 90%, 92% of homes have been destroyed. Half the hospitals are dysfunctional. People have been starving. There's been a sense that they've been cut off without the food, water, fuel, power supplies that they need. What help will it offer the people of Gaza to normalize relations between these nations? But don't help. How will there ever be peace between your peoples?
Just a quick reminder that Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. It was actually an experiment to see what would happen if this idea about creating a Palestinian homeland could be free of Israelis, and they could have a go at creating their own homeland. Now that experiment has been a shocking failure because here we are in 2025. Hamas turned it into a one big terrorist base. It's all the money went into Gaza instead of building up hospitals, universities, schools and roads, unfortunately went down into the ground to build this massive terror tunnel work. From Israel's point of view, we've got as much aid we possibly could. 1,300,000 tons of aid. That's more than enough food for everyone in Gaza. Hamas have stolen much of the aid and requisitioned it, and after feeding themselves, sold it back to Gaza's population at vastly increased prices. The best future for Gaza is
Well, just what's happening here, just this, the booze that we're seeing. It's a statement, isn't it, from someone?
Yeah, it's a statement from a government who's particularly popular. But look, you.
I have one final question.
Sure.
The state to destroy Hamas after the horrors of October the 7th. And they were to get these faces home, the people we see all around Hostages Square. In destroying Hamas, though, hostages died. You know Israeli hostages died. And you could not bring them home because you were still destroying Hamas. Were those two mutually excluding things? Did that drag on the pain for the families who were waiting for their loved ones to return?
Look, it was Hamas that took them hostage, Hamas that kept them hostage, and Hamas that kept fighting towards us. Okay, they could have been home, our hostages, on October the 8th. Okay, they could have not been taken. It was Hamas that had been dragging here, that if only Israel had made a deal. I mean, maybe you know something I don't, because the people in the room of the negotiations, like the Americans, they all say the same thing. Hamas were not interested in a deal until they were greatly degraded, until their leadership was eviscerated, until their missile and rocket arsenal had been taken away, until, more importantly, Iran had been massively put back in its box. Now they've got nowhere to go. The cavalry's not coming. That's why they've come to a deal. Look, our objectives in this war remain the same. They are to bring back our hostages, the 94 of them which are still there, and also to make sure that Hamas is not in control in Gaza, because a Gaza with Hamas in control is a Gaza which is an enemy of the Gazan people. Hamas is an enemy of the Gazan people. The sooner they're gone, the better.
One word then to describe today.
Elation, and because we're in Israel, I'll ask for a little bit more, and trepidation at the same time.
A long way to go. David Metzer, you've given us a lot of your time. We really appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very, very much indeed. So confirmation then from the Israel Defense Forces that those 3 young hostages are now safely at that reception centre, which has been set up by the IDF to relieve them. David Metzer's forgotten his phone and his keys. Sorry, just take those. Yes, indeed so. So confirmation then that this staging of the handover has taken another step. Now, though, to the latest from Gaza, Surgeon Dr. Hassan Abu Sitta is based at Gaza's Al Ahli Hospital. He's actually in London, but has worked, obviously, in Gaza. This is for Gaza. How do you think people there feel? How are you feeling? Finally, a ceasefire has been brought in.
That they can give them a decent burial. My colleagues in the health system have been trying to make their way back to what is left of Kamal Udwan, what is left of the hospital, what is left of the Indonesian hospital, to see how, and those of us who have lost colleagues, over 950 health workers killed by Israel in this genocidal war. Remember them, remember the bravery of the Palestinian health workers who defeated this genocidal erasure. We remember Dr. Ahmed Maqad Youngstown executed at Shifa Hospital. I remember Dr. Midhat Saydam killed in his house. The young Dr. Hammam al-Louh killed in his house. All of my colleagues. Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, who was tortured to death in Israeli prisons, according to Israeli newspapers and Israeli human rights organizations. Today is a day that we think of our dead, and we think of our people, and we plan for tomorrow. Despite the attempt to erase the Palestinian people, despite the genocidal erasure, tomorrow is a Palestinian day. We will build the Palestinian health system. We will mend our wounds. There are 13,000 Palestinian wounded, mainly children and women who need immediate surgery. There are 33 hospitals that have been destroyed, 12 universities that have been destroyed. 22,000 Palestinian children have been orphaned. There are 4,500 with amputation. All of this work, this 15 months of genocidal erasure, now we need to help people in Gaza mend wounds and their broken lives. And that's what the aim of the world is. Help the Palestinian people in Gaza overcome this genocide.
To Hassan, it is intolerable that so many children have died, that have been orphaned, that have been maimed. But you may have heard the Israeli government spokesperson, just with me, David Menser, suggesting it was Hamas who started this conflict on October the 7th. Now, you know, what do people think about Hamas? Do they wish they had never broken through the border that awful day at 6:29 in the morning, fired 4,300 rockets into Israel as that onslaught started? Do they wish that had never happened?
We wish that 1948 never happened. We wish that Israel had not tried to wipe out the indigenous population of Palestine and turned our families into refugees. We wish that the Sabra al-Shatila and the Dir Yassin massacres have never happened. We wish that the killings of the first and the second intifadas and all of the wars in Gaza had never happened. This is a war against the Palestinian people that is 75 years old. And to randomly pick a point in which to say that this is when we accept history. What spokesman whose boss is now wanted by the International Criminal Court? So he literally works for a wanted war criminal. What marks his discourse is the racial of Palestinians, is the fact that he 1,000 Palestinian dead children completely ungrievable. He does not Palestinian children. That and what lies at the heart of the fact that your channel refers to Palestinians as prisoners, even the children arrested without trial, and is again racialized of Palestinians that has allowed genocide to happen for 15 months. Our lives don't matter, neither to you or to him, because of the color of our skin. Our lives don't matter neither to you nor to him because we are Arab Muslims. The racialized othering of Palestinians allowed this genocide to take place.
Dr. Hassan, with so many people having been injured during 15 months of conflict, with hospitals, I think half of them almost out of action, what help do you need now to get treatment to people in Gaza who so desperately need it?
We need as many field hospitals to be brought in as possible. We need an open humanitarian corridor to allow the capacity of the health system to very quickly be upscaled and medical teams to be allowed in with the equipment and the consumables they need to set up and to start treating the wounded. There are 13,000 wounded who now need treatment. Gaza now has the world's largest population of amputees. We need to create an industry for prosthetic manufacturing manufacturing, and every child with an amputation needs a new prosthetic every 6 months. The world has never seen a calamity of the magnitude that is Gaza and the wounded in Gaza. And effort needs to be made to end the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza, to end this genocidal erasure so that it does not continue after the bombs and the bullets have stopped, so that the diseases and the wounds are healed and the infectious disease.
It's very, Dr. Hassan, excuse me, it's very noisy here. It's quite hard to hear you. I understand you put out a tweet on your X account showing photographs of truly exhausted doctors that you work with. What was your message to them?
For that photograph, the young doctor in the middle was Ahmed Maqadmi, a winner of the Royal College of Surgeons Award, a young surgeon. He was executed in Shifa Hospital. The doctor on the back, on the left, is Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, the head of orthopedics at Shifa. He was taken, arrested, and then tortured to death. And his body remains held hostage by the Israelis. Next to him is Dr. Mohammed Abeid, who's been arrested, who's an MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières surgeon, who was arrested and disappeared from Al Auda hospital a few months ago. All of these doctors in the picture have either been arrested or have been killed. Like the 950 Palestinian health workers who've been killed and the 450 health workers still in Israeli prisons. Israel still holds Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who was arrested on New Year's Eve for refusing to turn his back on his patients and saying all of this. Israel had made the dismantlement and the destruction of the Palestinian health system a central tenet of the military doctrine of this war in order to make Gaza uninhabitable. And one of the ways it did that was not Palestinian health workers. We need to rebuild the medical schools, rebuild the training programs, and rebuild the hospitals. But in the meantime, we need to increase the capacity of the health system by bringing in as many teams with field hospitals that can be set up in weeks so that to help people retrieve over 10 to 15,000 bodies under the rubble, so that public health catastrophe is ended. We need to help people rebuild the water and sewage systems. We need housing for Gaza. The scale of what was done to the people of Gaza, the world has never seen before, and the world owes it. But what the world also owes the Palestinian people is justice. There are 2 war criminals with arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court. These arrest warrants have to be